Welcome to Om on the Range, where we share the practice of meditation, the wisdom of Western Buddhism, and the refuge of our community. Whether you are new to meditation or a longtime practitioner, committed or curious, this offering is here to share solutions, stories, and support. Happiness and better health are available to everyone. It just takes practice. This is Om on the Range. Welcome to Om on the Range. This is episode number 28. I'm your host. My name is Whit, and I'm very happy to be here. And I'm happy that you're joining us today. Very pleased to welcome back Mr. Robert Brumet as this week's co-host. Welcome, Robert.
Thanks, Whit. I'm happy to be here.
Yesterday, you delivered a Dharma talk that addressed the role of impermanence in our lives and in the world. Your use of music, mathematics, and common sense allowed for a very accessible talk that covered a complex part of existence. So today we're going to continue that discussion and speak to the relationship between Buddhism and mathematics and how they view and explain the universe. Now, this is a number of very big topics, and so I will offer very little in this talk. To begin with, Robert, I was hoping you could start with a little definition of impermanence and what role it plays with Buddhism.
Well, impermanence goes by the name of anicca in Pali. Pali is the language spoken by the Buddha. The Buddha taught that there were three characteristics of existence in time and space. So if you live in time and space, there's these three things that you're going to meet. One is dukkha, which is dissatisfaction, or sometimes called suffering or difficulty, unsatisfactoriness. Basically means that there's nothing in this universe of time and space that can totally and completely satisfy us. No matter how much we have, we're going to be dissatisfied sooner or later. We see evidence of that in the world today all over the place.
Right.
And then the second characteristic was anicca or impermanence, which I'll come back to. And then the third one is anatta or not self, which means that there is not a permanent entity called self. The self really is more of a verb than a noun. Self is more of an activity.
It's interesting that just about everybody can understand the suffering piece because it's so prominent in our lives, that constant longing. And we kind of start to understand, we can see the logic and truth in the impermanence. And then, of course, anytime you bring up no self, that's where you lose everyone in the room. So it's an interesting pattern that it's really simple at one end and impossible at the other, but it's all true.
Exactly. So the impermanence, there's various ways of looking at it. When I first heard about impermanence, it was taught that everything changes, everything dies, everything grows old, everything decays, everything falls apart. And it's a rather depressing topic, you know,
Right.
when presented in that light. But then I came to realize that impermanence meant birth as well as death, and creation as well as destruction, and that impermanence was both the birthing and the death of the universe, moment by moment. And likewise in our lives, if we look at our experiences, my words are being born and dying, and the sensations in my body are being born and dying. Everything we experience has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it all has a life of its own.
I think it's interesting also that at that personal level, we're constantly creating and birthing ideas and patterns and projects and sometimes people, but we're constantly bringing that to the universe. And we love that part, and we're so into that. And yet, you're right, so many people get disillusioned and disappointed when things begin to decay and fall apart and start to continue this process.
Yes.
And it's surprising because it's like, hey, it's right in front of you. just happened. And no, maybe this time it'll be different.
Exactly. Yeah. In the processes and programs that teach creativity, the first thing they will say is forget everything you know. Empty your mind. If you want to be creative, the first thing you do is you empty your mind. You don't grab a book and start reading, but throw your books away and start from nothing. And that opens the door for that part of impermanence that is the rebirth part of it.
Which is your typical Buddhist pitch, right? Because we always start off with suffering, but with impermanence, you start off feeling it's a blow to the ego that you're not going to last forever. I haven't died yet, Robert. Maybe I can make this last. But I think it's interesting also that as you learn about it, you start to understand that it's not death or decay as much as it's just change and it's rebirth, and it's just part of the process.
You have died, actually. The wit that you are now is not the wit that you were 20 years ago, I'm quite sure. And same way with myself and everybody else. So what we hold on to is this illusion of continuity. We hold on to this. It's kind of like if you think of your life as a pearl, what we do is we string all of those pearls together and make a necklace out of them. And we say, this is my life. And it's the string that connects all of these pearls. It's created only by the mind, by memory.
It feels like those pearls, they're adjectives. I'm this, and I did this, and this happened. And
yes,
you said they're little things that we recall, we put together, and we don't have a clear view of them. You're right. I'm not the same wit that lived through those. They don't really have a big bearing on what we do now, except when I force them on a current situation. So if just, this is my favorite part of the podcast, Robert, when I completely crumple up the outline of the show that I sent you and then ask you something completely off topic. But if we're not our experiences and we're not those pearls, what are we?
A thought.
Okay.
It's the memory of these experiences and the anticipation of future experiences. The other day, actually it was a couple of years ago now that I think about it, I was at one of my former churches in Overland Park, Kansas, Unity Church. And I've been away from there for many years. Somebody asked me, were you the minister of this church at one time? I said, well, I'm not sure how to answer that, because I would normally say, yes, I am. But there are different people in the church. The congregation has all changed. They changed locations. They've changed their name. But somehow it seems like the same church. Everything has changed about it.
Right.
And the only thing that's changed is just this thread of history that we carry around with us, this memory string, the string of memories. So that's really what we are, is a string of memories.
Yeah, I felt the metaphor of the church and all is kind of the same for your life that you're leaving. You think there's a string there, right? I did this, but I was curious. I always like to fall back on the idea that we're awareness, but I just don't know that that's true. I don't know that's the purest version of it. But how often do I get a chance to get you on the podcast and paint you into a corner like this? So,
well, they are awareness, but then the question is, what makes Wit and what makes Robert? And so what's unique about that awareness? The uniqueness is made up of things that are all changing. Your physicality, your mind, your genetics, it's all changing. And ultimately, it's simply a thought that connects them all. It's sort of like somebody said, when you look at the sky, you've never seen a Big Dipper. And yet once you see the Big Dipper, you can never look at the sky and not see the Big Dipper.
Yeah.
Because the mind automatically will connect those dots, those stars, say there's the Big Dipper up there.
Right.
Well, there's no more of a Big Dipper up there than our imagination. And so we do the same thing with the points in our life. We give it a name, and every time we think of it or look at it, that's the name we give to it, and we think that's the reality. It's like the Big Dipper.
I'd prefer you didn't start calling me the Big Dipper if you don't mind.
Okay.
One of the things in your Dharma talk that I thought was interesting was you talked a little bit about music. One of the things I got from it was you start to realize when we were listening to the notes and really paying attention that the music actually seems to or does happen between the notes, the way it felt to me, and that was very surprising to me in a very positive manner.
Yes. And especially in certain companies, there can be a long pause, and that pause really is the most important part of the melody. I was thinking of the 1812 Overture, for example.
Yeah, I appreciate you also using a musical reference that I could find. So that's good because that's also, we'll add that to the list of things that I'm not very well versed in. Classical music is certainly one of them. So I think what I got from that was that idea that, hey, there's really nothing solid to what we experience. To me, what I thought was cool was that, when you stop trying to, since nothing's solid and everything exists in a different form at a different level, you could have a more happy, healthy life if you didn't try to hang on to stuff and quit thinking about everything in solid forms, whether it's life or this table.
And that's really what the Buddha was saying, is that no self, no problem. There's lots of Zen stories. A young fellow came to the Roshi saying, I've got this problem with anger. Can you help me get rid of my anger? And the Roshi said, well, I think so. Come on in. And he says, okay, show me your anger. Put it out there on the floor, and we'll take a look at it, and I'll see if I can get rid of it for you. The student said, well, I can't show you the anger. There's nothing to see. And then Roshi, of course, says, see, resolved your anger issue. There's no anger there anymore. The point making, anger is not a thing. Anger is an activity.
Right.
Anger is something we do. It's not something we are. But we can take it on as a definition. I'm angry. He's angry.
Right.
He's an angry person.
Well, but a lot of times we kind of wear it as a cloak, as a poster of who we are in that moment. And some people adopt it to the point where it's who they are a lot of their life. It's their default response to almost anything.
With impermanence, there's that discomfort of letting go. If we don't have the realization that there's something new emerging or something that exists beyond what was released, we get very panicky. We get very frightened. And to avoid that fear, we just don't put any space in there. We just connect the dots and go boom, 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 boom. We don't allow for that rhythm. Instead of the music, we get just a constant hum, a constant buzz.
Yeah. And it's funny that we choose that as a way of life, or at least in the West, that's kind of the way we're brought up. Okay, what's next and what are we going to accomplish now? And also there's always that judging present moment, past or future. What's best for me going forward? What did that person do to me back here? Or what was unfair about this? It's amazing. You give up the pearls, right? You try to live in the spaces. You just let the rest kind of float by. It's so freeing. You free yourself from all those intersections that you've created where there's pain and suffering.
Exactly. You got a bowl of pearls, and you can reach in and grab any one of them anytime you want to, or you can juggle them or rearrange them any way you want. But if they're strung together, or in some cases glued together, maybe, they become rigid, they become stiff, and you don't have that flexibility. And that's the nature of music. It's always changing. If it wasn't changing, it wouldn't be music.
It's interesting to me also, you mentioned in your talk about Einstein's theory of, is it the equation of energy? Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, that's one of the equations that was developed out of his theories of relativity.
Okay. And so, again, that connection between practice, between Buddhism and science and mathematics and the universe and our existence and how life, the physics of it has become, I think it's fair to say, more illuminated. People are starting to learn more about it, both from a physicist side or from a mathematics side. They've started to understand that Buddha was saying those sort of things 2,500, 3,000 years ago. Would you speak a little bit about how all those things come together and share some of the same truth?
Yeah, the scientists most will not go so far as to say the Buddha proved science or that science is proving the Buddha, but it's like there's this amazing parallel between what the Buddha taught and what scientists are discovering. When you look at empty space, it's not empty. There are subatomic particles constantly being created out of nothing and returning to nothing. At the most minute level, there is existence and non-existence coming together, going back and forth, and that everything in the universe consists of some form of a vibration, and everything in the universe has some kind of melody to it. I know some people that do sound healing, for example, with crystal bells or various instruments. Illness in the body is sometimes when we get out of tune with ourselves and lose that attunement. It's like a river that creates a back eddy. Not all of the river's going forward. It starts to come back.
Right.
And that back eddy is where all of the junk accumulates and all of the polluted water accumulates back in these back eddies, whereas the flow, the mainstream of the river stays clean. And we do much the same thing. We have parts of our bodies where we're not in the flow, as it were. Whether it's the food we eat, these are all constantly flowing through the body. If the flow gets blocked, we can have some real problems.
Have you ever covered this subject in any of your books? I was just curious. Is this something you've covered on your own or in your past?
I haven't. It's not been in any of my books that I can recall. This Dharma talk I gave really was the first version, if you will, of this bringing together of the Dharma, music, and mathematics.
It was really moving and, like I said, tremendously interesting just because it felt so relatable and it was easy to grasp some concepts that are pretty big, difficult. So,
Exactly.
you spoke also on mathematics has that ability to predict some unseen results or realities or, I don't know, prove years before they're actually found in the world. So how does that relate to your time in Buddhism and your time on the path?
Let me see how that went down. I would say that when we in the West think of impermanence, when we think of no self, when we think of a void, we don't have any context for what's there other than nothingness. But if we were to really look at what that nothingness is, it's not nothing. It is patterned, and it is seen. It can be seen. I'm thinking of a classic example of fractals. We've all seen images of these beautiful forms that are created, and they're created simply out of relatively simple equations, what they call recursive. They occur over and over again at very high speeds. When this happens, it creates a beautiful pattern that is sometimes visible. And sometimes it's visible in the form of hearing. We call that music. So it can be visible in the form of visual. We'll call that art or beauty. And sometimes it's patterned in a way that the intellect gets a hold of it and calls it cohesive, meaningful. The universe is patterned, and those patterns are invisible. If we lose sight of what's visible, there's nothing there. If I'm not me, I must be nothing. Rather than, if I'm not me, maybe I'm everything.
Right. Yeah, that's sort of those Buddhist things, right? When you try to explain to somebody that they're not all the things that they think they are, you're not those adjectives. Well, then we immediately take on that depressive, sad face and think, oh, well, then I'm nothing. It's like, no, 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 you're not nothing. You're only anything at all in the present moment.
Exactly.
So focus there, stay there.
Exactly.
You know? Well, that's hard. Well, that's okay. Hard is good in this instance,
Yeah.
It's not any harder living in the present than, if you think that's hard, try living in the past.
Yeah, it causes lots of difficulty, doesn't it?
It does. How can people do better, you think, with understanding and living with the simple fact that what they see is not the whole picture?
Well, I would say that paying attention to your moment by moment experience, you will see a certain pattern. And what begins to arise, at least for me, what I've noticed over the years is that as I look at the change in my life, both letting go and things coming into my life, as I've seen the rise and fall of impermanence, I ask, what is it that's not changed? At first, I'll say, well, there's nothing that's not changed. Everything has changed. But wait a minute. The person or the being or the whatever it is, not really a person, the awareness that sees the change is the same awareness that was there 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. What I was seeing, what I was experiencing was totally different, yet the same awareness was there.
Right.
We begin to get the sense that we are not a thing and we're not even an activity, but rather we are the awareness that holds that space. It's never changed by what's in it. So in other words, whether you're aware of bliss or whether you're aware of excruciating pain, the awareness itself is just the same. It doesn't change, and it's not clouded by it. Sometimes they say, like, in an empty room, if you look at the space in a room, no matter what's in that room, you could set off a bomb and it wouldn't hurt the space. The space would still be there untouched, no matter what. Just as in a house, the houses we live in, we don't live in the house. We live inside the empty space.
Right. It's kind of like back to the music, where it's actually what's happening between the notes as opposed to the notes themselves.
Yeah, exactly. If this house were a solid object, it'd be worthless.
Right.
It has value only because there's space inside of it.
Right. Wow.
And yet the mathematics part of it, I think, is like the house does have a structure. So the space is structured, so to speak.
Right. It's kind of like what we were talking about, where math has the ability to prove things in advance. It kind of builds the structure, and then we become aware of the space.
Exactly. Yeah.
So whatever it is we're applying it to.
When you think of your living room, you've got a structure there, whether you're in that living room or not. There's this sense of the universe is patterned, and in some of the ancient wisdom teachings, Pythagoras and Euclid, and some of the ancient Greeks, they say God created geometry before he created the universe.
Wow.
And that geometry is the structure and the form that holds the universe.
I would have done better in 10th grade geometry if somebody would have started with that, because
I know.
it was math that I couldn't understand.
Exactly.
Robert, we're just about out of time, but I have a real quick question for you.
Certainly.
I think is it fair to say that with these kind of big relationships and these big ideas and truths, having a practice makes them more accessible because you develop some space and time to let them in?
Absolutely, because otherwise they're just ideas. They're just thoughts.
You might understand them, but you're not living them.
It's like trying to live in a blueprint of a house. You need the blueprint to have the house, but you can't live in it. You got to have the house itself.
Robert, I want to thank you for co-hosting and sharing all of your profound wisdom. It is always amazing to get to talk to you and hear your teachings, but also for you to give up your time to be on the show. The show itself is better because of your support. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks to all of you listening. Feel free to comment or question on the platforms where you find us. You can email the show at omontherange.podcast@gmail.com. Until next week, take care of yourself, take care of others, and happy trails. Thanks to our On the Range production team for making this program possible, and to Mr. Brad Athey for composing and performing the original music. And to you, our listeners, thank you for being a part of this journey as we explore meditation, Western Buddhism, and the path towards a happier, healthier life. Remember, less suffering and more joy are available to everyone. It just takes practice. Until next time, stay grounded, stay kind, and keep finding peace in the simple, practical things. For all of us here at On the Range, happy trails.